So during my month of soaking prayer, some of the words that I received were, nothing is impossible for him. He does what he says he will do. Also, Isaiah 26:3. You will keep in perfect peace him whose mind is steadfast, because he trusts in you. And also, that's it. We were hoping to get a definitive answer at the end of this month as to what we were supposed to do. And I'm thinking, okay, these people are going to be praying for us about this very specific issue for a month. God's going to say something. He's going to give instruction. Go left, or whatever. And so, at the end of that month, we all got together, and I said, okay, what did he say? And what everybody got was pretty much silence. No answer at all. And I just wanted to read you a tiny excerpt from my journal that day. I wrote, I'm supposed to hear what the Lord has spoken over me for the past month of praying, but what the group has received is silence. Nothing? Really, God? It's so frustrating. But when I'm honest with myself, I have wondered, what if they just tell me what they think we should do, and it's only their opinion and not direction from you? Shortly after that, I was telling Paul's sister, Cindy, about our struggle and just all of that, and not knowing what to do, and having the radio silence, which was so frustrating. And she calls me the next day, and she says that she heard the third day song, Revelation, on the radio, and she felt like the words paralleled what I had been telling her. And she was praying, and she clearly heard the verse, James 1:27, look after orphans, which has pretty much been our mantra for years at that point. And she tells me, I really think you're supposed to adopt. The very next day, this is Mother's Day weekend, the very next day I am catering a luncheon at a local church, their Mother's Day luncheon that they have annually. And the speaker is talking about times when we need to press in to receive the joy of the Lord. And ladies are asked to share testimonies if they want to. The last woman out of the three that share tells about her years of infertility and their decision to go ahead and adopt. And at the end, she states, if there is someone here today who is struggling with infertility and thinking about adoption, I would really like to talk with you. And I'm thinking, that's me. Everything within me is just screaming, that's me, you're talking to me right now. But I'm working, I'm like in the back of the room, I'm trying not to cry. And I'm like, okay, I need to talk to this woman, but I need to wait to the very end, otherwise I'm going to completely fall apart. So at the very end of the afternoon, I approach her, and she just looks at me and says, it's you, isn't it? You're thinking about adopting. And I choke out the word yes. And she goes and she runs and she gets a piece of paper, and she scribbles a name and number on it and hands it to me and says, I'm giving you my lawyer's name. Call him immediately. And she said that she had really felt God tell her to give her testimony, even though this was her home church and everybody had already heard her story. And she said she kind of argued with God a little bit. No, I don't need to get up there. Everybody's heard it already. And she said, God says, you need to support someone that's here today. And it was me. So we take the lawyer's name and number, and the very next day after that is Mother's Day. And Mother's Day has been really, really, really hard. And I know that there even have been some years that I have skipped church on Mother's Day, or I've come and I've left crying early. And that day I wrote in my journal, I thought today would be awful emotionally, but I decided to trust and lean on God as much as I knew how. Thankfully, I didn't feel the heaviness that I thought I would. This morning, I happened to read Psalm 113, which says, He settles the barren woman in her home as the happy mother of children. Praise the Lord.
So we found it really interesting that God worked around Stephanie's concern about people praying for her and then maybe just sharing something that was just on their own heart or mind. And she was concerned about that. She's like, they know my pain, so maybe they're just going to come soothe it. Not like maliciously, but just anyway. So she was concerned about that. So God worked around that by not revealing anything to those people who were praying for her, and instead revealing it to someone else that shared it for her. Someone completely out of the loop. And so, yeah, we thought that was pretty interesting and cool, and that God has a sense of humor for sure. So the next week, like just a couple days after this event, we call that attorney, and we have a consultation with him. Really nice old guy. Turns out he's not an adoption attorney. He's a probate attorney. But he adopted his own kids, and he does adoption services for Christian families just as a ministry, and has very reasonable rates for that. So we thought that was kind of cool. But he gave us this list of things to go do. He's like, okay, you gotta create this profile and put in pictures of you and your bunny so people think you're cute. You've got to go in and talk to all these different doctors' offices all around rural places, and you got to speak at churches. And he gave us this list. He said, "This is how people do it. This is how people find babies." And we left really overwhelmed. We left kind of just feeling like, and he said, it's going to take a couple years because you have to find a birth mom first, and then the birth mom, it's going to be 3 months along, so you're going to wait 6 months and kind of support her in that, and then who knows, she may decide to keep the baby. So you have to be prepared for that. So we really left just kind of going, a few more years of disappointment, right? And so we started some of those things, but we didn't finish any of them. We just felt it was just so overwhelming, and we just kind of threw our hands up in the air, and it was good to have the information. We knew what we needed to do. We were working on getting it done. It just was we were procrastinating, I guess. That following weekend, Stephanie went down to a service down at Albany Vineyard, and Ivan Roman down there, who's the youth pastor, talked about the spirit of adoption. And so Steph was like, okay, I get it. We understand. So then that was late May, right around there. And then we're driving somewhere, I'm not sure where we're going, we're in the car, and Steph is noticing.
So at the very beginning of June, I felt that God said to me, your baby exists right now in utero. I was like,
she's telling us in the car.
I was like, that is not coming from my head right now. And so I'm like, that's God. It's like, okay, so I tell Paul, I'm like, honey, I feel like God's telling me our baby exists right now. And I really feel like I need to start getting things ready. So, can I get the room ready? Because we had this room in our house set aside for a nursery. And ever since we came back from Mexico in 2007, that room has been empty. Completely empty, not a stick of furniture in it. There were a few things in the closet, but door stayed shut and the room was empty. And he kept telling me, hey, we should make this into a library, or well, maybe we should have somebody room in with us or whatever. And I was like, no, this is the nursery. That's what this room is meant to be, and that's what it's going to be. No. So I tell him, I want to start getting stuff ready, and so I go and I paint the nursery, my crib, and all the furniture for the nursery, car seat, stroller, everything that you need to bring a baby home, aside from diapers and formula. And a baby. So by the middle of July, everything is ready and waiting in that room. And sometimes I would go in there and I would be like, okay, God, I'm ready. Bring it on.
And I would look at the room and just think, this is kind of weird. We've got a nursery ready, and we have no idea where the baby's going to come from. Actually, when Steph was out buying the stuff, people would be like, oh, what do you do? She's like, I'm not. Oh, are you adopting? Maybe. Yeah, and so it was interesting. So yeah, that was in the middle of July, and we had a baby room already, and then that she had it already. But during that time in June, I received my very first Father's Day card, which was just a little odd. It was actually from the youth group, and I was like, well, that's kind of cool, it's kind of nice. But it was prophetic, and that was that's the first year I was actually a father, even though I didn't know it. I received my first Father's Day card while my baby was in utero. And so God had shared with Stephanie that Colton existed already, right? At that point, and I believe that was Him sharing that with me as well. That saying, you're a father right now. So shortly after that, in June as well, we visit with some really good old friends of ours, Mike and Megan Bird. And they're adopting, at that point, a baby from Africa, which is really cool, and she's adorable. And so we tell them, we're at least out to dinner with them, and they're sharing this with us. And so we say, yeah, we're thinking about adoption too. And they're like, oh, well, they had a whole bunch of questions for us that we didn't have answers to, because we didn't know what we were doing. And they're like, well, what country? They're like, this one. And they're like, oh, well, what agency are you working through? I'm like, we're not. We met with an attorney. He's not an adoption attorney, but he told us to call him when we find a baby. So they thought that was kind of strange. And Mike later admitted to us that on the way home, he said to his wife, "They're ridiculous. That is never going to work." So that was sometime, I don't know, in June or something. And then Stephanie's getting the nursery ready. And then August 6th, you want to share this part? Okay. August 6th, we receive an email, and it's forwarded to us from none other than Mike Bird, who had told his wife this was never going to work. And in the email it says, there's a baby that was born last night, and it needs to be adopted today. And we need somebody that has an attorney available for an emergency placement. So I'm like, well, that's kind of wild. So I call Stephanie, and she's at work, and I read her the email, and I'm like, did we call the attorney? She's like, well, yeah. So I call the attorney's office, and at first I just talked to a secretary or something, and I'm asking if our attorney's there. She's like, oh no, he's in a meeting, da da da. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, can you just let him know that we found a baby, and that he should call us back when he can. And so then the attorney's assistant, who was working our case, basically, asked, who's that? They said, oh, it was the Wilcoxes, they found a baby or something. And so she immediately calls me back, and because she knows what's going on, and she calls me back and gets the details. She calls the hospital, and then calls me back in 20 minutes and says, okay, the hospital needs to know what you're naming your baby, they need it for the paperwork.